Hi guys, it's Miss Edwards. I am recording this lesson. This is your asynchronous lesson for 1-4 literal equations. Okay, so go ahead and take a second, pause your video, and I would like you to solve this warm-up problem. Think about what we talked about in yesterday's lesson when we talked about types of solutions. So go ahead and pause. Okay, welcome back. So hopefully you have paused your video, you've solved each one of these, and now you know which ones have no solutions. So rather than going through every single one of them, I'm going to talk about the actual answers. If for some reason you got something different or you would like me to check your work, you can take a picture of it and send it to me and then we can talk about it. So for A, when you get to the very end after you solve for X, you should have ended up with X equals -15. So since we ended up with X equals a value, we know that that has one solution. So that does not satisfy what it says up here where it says no solution. Okay, for B, make sure that you distribute your 5 to -2x and to 7. It does not get distributed to the 3 because that 3 is outside of your parentheses. Okay, when you get to the end of this one, you ended up with identical situations. You ended up with -10x plus 38 equals -10x plus 38. So as soon as you got to that step, you didn't have to continue. You could have. You could have canceled out your -10x and -10x, and you would have had 38 equals 38. Since that is a true solution, this one has an infinite number of solutions, okay, because any value will work for x. So that also has does not satisfy our no solution rule. Okay, when it came to this one, it had some fractions here, but it wasn't too bad because it was 1/2 and these are even values inside. So you can take half of each one of those values when you distribute. For this one, when you get to the end, after you cancel out your variables, you end up getting -2 equals -6. Well, that is not a true statement. -2 does not equal -6. So that one has no solution. So C was one of the ones. Okay. All right, for D, this one just also got a little confusing because of this 1/100. What a lot of people do is they will convert that into a decimal. So 1/100 is 1/100th, which would be written as 0.01. So this is the tenths column. This, you put the 1 in the hundredths column. Okay, so they use that number and distributed that rather than dealing with that fraction. Okay, when you get to the end of this one, you end up with, let's see, 1,000th equals 1/10. Again, that is not a true statement. They're very close, but totally different numbers. So that one also has no solution. Okay. In E, we had double distributing going on here. So we had to distribute on both sides of the equation. And this one, when you get to the end, it says 7 equals 8. Again, that is a false statement. So it is no solutions. Okay, so just as a review, if you get a variable equal something, that is one solution. If you get identical equations, or you get something like 38 equals 38, okay, that's true. That means there are infinitely many solutions. And then when we get answers like we did for the last 3, where it's a false statement, that is no solution. Okay, again, if you would like to see all of the work or you would like me to check what you did, send me a picture or send me an email and I can always check it for you. Okay, so let's talk about this. So if you look at the picture, this is a rectangle. And it asks us to write an equation that represents the perimeter of this model. So I see my rectangle right here. I have 2 lengths, I have 2 widths, and then all I did was they kind of separated and put it all into one line. So if we want to write an equation that represents the perimeter of this, we can say P equals, and then I'm looking at each segment that's here, okay? I have a length plus a width plus a length plus a width. Okay, sorry, my cursive L's don't look like that, but they use a cursive L so that way it doesn't look like a 1. Okay, so that is the equation that represents the perimeter of this model. Okay, and then B says rearrange the order of the sides so you can represent the perimeter with a different equation. So we're not changing anything about it, we're just reorganizing this. So let's put all of the like terms together. So we can rewrite it as the perimeter equals length plus width plus width. So all of our lengths are together, all of our widths are together. So C says, how many different ways could you express this relationship? Okay, well, there's 2 different ways. Is there another way that we could write it? I know some of you are jumping right to the simplified part, where since we have 2 L's and 2 W's, we could say P equals 2 lengths plus 2 widths. Okay. If we factor out that 2, we can say the perimeter equals 2 length plus width. Okay, so that's absolutely another way of doing it. Now, there's also, that's all for perimeter, but we could also write it for length or for width. So I'm going to change colors here just so you can see these are a little bit different. If I wanted just the length, okay, I want to solve just for my length. Well, I could take my whole perimeter and take away the widths. Okay, so I can say perimeter minus the widths that are there. And we have 2 of those, so we got to take away 2 widths. Okay, so I take the whole thing, I take away this, I take away that, but I'm left with 2 lengths. I want to know what one length is. So I would have to take this value and I would have to divide it by 2, or you can multiply it by 1/2. Okay, and that would give us the value of 1 length. Okay, now I could also solve for width, very similarly, like to that. So if I want just 1 width, I could take the perimeter and take away the 2 lengths. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before, perimeter minus 2 of the lengths. That will leave me with this width and this width over here. Okay, so I only want 1 of those widths, so I either have to divide by 2 or I can take this and multiply it by 1/2. So see how many different ways we can write this equation. We can solve it for the perimeter, we could solve it for the length, we can also solve it for the width. And that leads us into today's topic. Okay, so here are 2 vocabulary words that you're going to see. Sometimes these are used interchangeably. You see them most often in math and science. So a formula, let me go ahead and click here, is an equation that states a relationship between one quantity and one or more other quantities. Some formulas that you may know are like the Pythagorean theorem, which is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. There is some science ones as well, like velocity equals distance divided by time. Okay, and then what we're going to talk about today are literal equations. So literal equations are equations expressed in letters or variables. So these ones sometimes have numbers involved, but most of the time it's all letters. Okay, so like I said, most of these are seen in science and math class or science and math problems. Okay, so here is our first one. In a half hour, Sarah is meeting her friends at the lake 6 miles from her house. At what average speed must she ride her bike in order to get there on time? So the first thing we need is we need the distance formula, and I've given that to you right here. So distance equals rate or speed times time. Okay, they use rate for speed. Okay, and the first step says solve the distance formula for r. So what we want to do is we want to get r by itself. So if we look at this, on the r side, we have t. How are r and t connected? Well, they're connected by multiplication. So to get r by itself, I would have to divide by t because I want t to go away. Okay, so this t and this t are going to cancel out. And I have my new formula. I could just rearrange it. I could put r on this side. I could say r equals d over t. So rate equals distance divided by time. Okay, so it's not too bad. Just think about how you could get that variable by itself. Okay, so this one says find the average speed or rate, which we already know we have isolated, for which time Sarah must ride her bike to be on time. So we don't know the rate, but we do know the distance that she has to travel and how long she has to get there. So if we go back up to our problem, how far does she have to travel? She has to travel 6 miles. So we're going to put 6. And then time is how long does she have to get there? She has in half an hour. Now be careful. Typically, the denominator represents whole hours. So since we're talking about half of an hour, we need to write it as a decimal. So half of an hour is represented by 0.5. Okay? And then if we take 6 divided by 0.5, or you can think to yourself, how many halves are in 6? You get R equals 12. And the last step is to talk about what we're talking about. Well, we're talking about miles per hour. So you can say MPH. You can write it as miles over hours as a fraction. But that's how fast she would have to ride to make it to her friend's house 6 miles away in half of an hour. Okay, let me scroll down a little bit. So I would like you guys to take time to try this. Try it. Again, I'm going to give you that formula that we had is right here. So it's because you're still solving for rate. It's rate equals distance divided by time. So go ahead and pause your video at this point, solve this, and then come back and check the answer. All right. So hopefully you have your answer. We want to figure out this time she is going 2.5 miles away to go to the store. She only has 15 minutes to get there. So it says, at what average speed does she have to travel? So average speed is our rate. Our distance is 2.5 miles away. And she has 15 minutes to get there. Now remember, we talked about this has to be a whole hour. So what part of an hour is 15 minutes? So 15 minutes is a quarter of an hour. So if I take 15 times 4, I'm going to get 1 hour. So I need to divide by 0.25. Okay, 1/4 of an hour. All right, if you go ahead and you do this division here, you should get 10 miles per hour. So she has to travel 10 miles per hour in order to get to the store that is 2.5 miles away in just 15 minutes. Okay. All right, so this one, a worker is at a framing store is making a rectangular frame. He knows the perimeter of the frame is 144 inches and the length is 40 inches. And we can see that right from the diagram here, the 40 inches here. We are not sure what the width is, but we know all of these added together equal 144. So let's think back to that perimeter problem we talked about in the beginning. So we came up with a simplified formula, P equals 2 lengths plus 2 widths. Okay, what do we want to know? Do we want to know the perimeter? Do we want to know the length? Or do we want to know the width? Well, in this case, we know the perimeter and the length. We don't know the width. So we need to solve this equation for W. So if I'm thinking about W, right now 2W are connected to each other. I need to move this 2L first. 2L is connected to 2W by addition. So I need to subtract 2L from both sides. So that will cancel that out. So over here, I cannot combine them together because P and L are not like terms. So I'm just going to write them side by side. And then over here, all we have left is 2W. So my final step is to get this W all alone. So I need to divide both sides by 2. Okay, these are going to cancel out. And if you want to, you can rearrange this so that way the W is on the left. You can say W equals P minus 2L divided by 2. Okay, just leave it just like that. You don't need to simplify any further. That is our equation. Okay, So now that we know this equation, we can substitute any values that we know in. So we're not sure what the width is. The perimeter, if we go back to our problem, is 144 minus 2. The length is 40. So again, I'm going to substitute that in. And our denominator is 2. Okay. Well, I know negative 2 times 40, that's negative 80. So I have 144 minus 80 over 2. Okay. If we subtract 144 minus 80, we should get 64 over 2. And then if you simplify again, 64 divided by 2 is 32. Now, what unit are we talking about here? How are they measuring? Well, I'm looking at the picture. They're using inches. So that means that the width of this has to be 32 inches long. So it's 32 wide and 40 tall. All right, if you are unsure and you want to double check your answer, you can substitute 32 in here. You can either substitute it into this green equation, or you can do 32 plus 40 plus 32 plus 40, and you should get 144 as your answer. Okay, so here's another try it. So they give us the formula for the area of a triangle. So here is our formula. And they would like you to solve, it says find the height. Okay, so your hint is, your very first step is you should be solving for height. Solve for h. Go ahead and pause your video and then come back to check the answer. All right, so we want to solve for h. So I'm going to start by just writing the equation again. Okay, and I know that these are really multiplied, so I'm just going to put a multiplication symbol in there just so we know what we're doing here. Now I need to get h by itself. So in order to get h by itself, I need to remove b and the 1/2. Let's do the 1/2 first. So we talked about this before in our other equation video, an equation lesson. Normally we would divide by 1/2 because that's being multiplied times the h, but we can't divide fractions. So we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to take this side and I'm going to multiply it by 2 over 1. And I'm going to do the same thing to this side over here. Okay. So 2 over 1 times a is the same thing as saying 2a. And then over here, the 1/2 and the 2 over 1 cancel each other out. So we're left with b times h. Now, if I want h by itself, it's connected to b by multiplication, so I have to divide by b. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do the same thing to the other. So our b's cancel out, and again, I'm going to just rearrange this so I like the h in the front. I have h equals 2a over b. And this is the equation we're going to use to solve this equation. So you always have to solve for the variable you want first before you actually solve the problem. So now we know that a is 18 and b is 9. So I can substitute those in for those two variables. So we have h equals 2 times 18, and our b is 9. Okay. Well, 2 times 18, that's 36 divided by 9. So h is equal to 4. And again, you want to go back to your units. And in this one, we're talking about inches. So our final answer is 4 inches. That's how tall, or the height of the triangle. All right, we're moving on here. Okay, so I'll tell you, this one is a great problem. Sometimes when you're cooking and you're looking up recipes online, you end up getting recipes from like the UK and Europe. Well, in Europe, they use Celsius. Here in the States, we use Fahrenheit. And I was always confused, like, how do I convert from here Fahrenheit to Celsius and back and forth? Okay, so in this picture, they give us, this is the formula for Celsius. So Celsius equals 5/9 Fahrenheit minus 32. Okay, and we want to bake our bread at 190 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes. Now I'll tell you, in this case, the minutes doesn't really matter there's no time in this formula, so that part doesn't matter. What we do need is, it says what temperature in Fahrenheit should the oven be? So we need Fahrenheit, so that's what we're going to solve for. Rewrite the formula to find Fahrenheit. Okay, so I'm going to do this over here. I have C equals 5/9 Fahrenheit minus 32. Okay, we're going to do it the same way we did before. Okay, so we want to get rid of the 5/9 first. Now that's multiplying times this. So I would have to divide both sides by 5/9, and I don't like doing that. So I'm going to multiply this whole side by 9/5, the reciprocal of 5/9, and I'm going to multiply this side by 9/5. 9/5 times C is just 9/5 C. And then on this side, when you multiply these out, they end up canceling each other out. Okay, so you can always test it out if you want to. So 9 times 5 is 9 times 5 is 45. 9 times 5 is 45. 45 over 45 is just 1, so that cancels each other out. So we are left with F minus 32. Okay, remember, we want to get this F by itself, so I have to add 32 to both sides. Okay, so that cancels out. And I get the formula F equals 9/5 C plus 32. Okay, these are not like terms, they cannot be added together. So this is the formula we're going to use to figure out what the temperature should be. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit. Okay, we know that the oven or the recipe calls for 190 degrees Celsius. So I'm going to go ahead and substitute that in for C. So this is what we're using here. So Fahrenheit equals 9/5, and then they give us the temperature of 190 degrees Celsius plus 32. Now, if you're using your calculator, there is one on the Schoology page. If you look in the resources folder, there's a scientific calculator there for you. In order to multiply a fraction times a whole number, you can either divide this out and then multiply by 190, or you can do 9 times 190 and then divide by 5. Okay, so if I end up doing that, I end up getting a pretty big number. Let me see where I wrote it down. Okay, so 9 times 190 divided by 5 gives me 342. So I'm just going to bring everything else down. Now all I have to do is combine these together. So the Fahrenheit temperature should be 374 degrees. Okay, so if your recipe calls for 190 degrees Celsius and you're here in the States, you're going to set your oven for 374 degrees instead. All right, so at this point, this is going to be your exit ticket. So let me show you real quick where you're going to go, and I'm going to be pulling out these questions here. But this is going to be your exit ticket for today. In order to get credit for today's lesson, I have to see this form. So you're going to go to your Schoology page, and let me grab that real quick so I can show you. Wherever I put it. Let's see. Okay, when you are in your Algebra 1 page, you're going to go to week 2. You're going to find today's date, which today is Wednesday. It's an asynchronous day. This is where you went to see your instructions, and you clicked the video for this is right here. You are going to click on the tickets that are here. Now, if you still want a little bit more practice before you try the exit ticket, there are 2 virtual nerd videos down here that you can watch just to give you some extra practice. But you go ahead and you click on these tickets, and up pops a Google form. All right, in the Google form, you go ahead and put your first and last name, and then it has all of the questions that I'm about to show you right now. Okay, and then when you get down to the bottom, you tell me how you feel about literal equations, and make sure you hit submit. Okay, that will send it right to me. All right, so here are the problems. All right, so problem number 1, 3x plus y equals z. Solve for x. Okay, number 2. AB plus D equals C plus E. Solve for letter A. Three, P equals 4C. Solve for the letter C. Four, FD minus M equals 8. Solve for the letter D. Five, 1/5 V plus GT equals A. Solve for V. Six, 4D minus P equals M. Solve for D. Seven, 2G minus 4F equals 6F. Solve for G. 8, D equals R times T. Solve for T. 9, 24 equals length times width times height. So L times W times H. Solve for W. Number 10, P equals 2 times the quantity L plus W. Solve for W. So whatever variable it says to solve for, that's the variable that you're getting by itself, and you're rewriting a new equation. Okay, if you have any questions, please send me a message on Schoology, or you can email me. I'm available for help during this time. You can always check into our session. If it's after the school time, after our scheduled time in the classroom, again, email me and we can set up a time if you need help.